For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are looking at the horror / making of documentary. This is The Darkside of Society. This documentary explores the making of, the challenges, and the somewhat uncomfortable truth about the experiences that inspired the 1989 body horror Society. Now, the 1989 film Society is required viewing before you see this film, and I did a retrospective review of this film yesterday, so go check out and go just find Society. It's a fantastic film. I'll spoil it by review. I loved it. It's one of the best body horror films from the 80s I've ever come across. And now, let's get back to this review. While I do feel like this review does have some very heartbreaking notes to it that are very similar to the subject matter within the 1989 movie that inspired this documentary, I kind of felt like this documentary largely kind of handles its subject with kind of kid gloves, if I'm really honest. And don't get me wrong, overall, I found this film to be very riveting, very engaging, and very surprisingly heartwarming at some moments, especially just where the subject of the film goes in Zeph E. Daniel, and kind of his background and his history as one of the screenwriters of Society. But I largely felt like how they handled some of the subject matter, especially the satanic panic of the 80s, could have been done a little bit more in depth, could have shared a little bit more research and statistics to kind of the documentary just kind of makes it feel like, wow, you know, that is a thing that happened in history. It feels like Zeph's story feels almost kind of like a one-off, and I really would have kind of liked it for kind of make it feel like this all-encompassing bit of storytelling when you're kind of talking about how big of a deal this really was in the 80s. Now, I've done my research on the satanic panic of the 80s. I think it is a fascinating period in our history. If you are unaware of just how massive the satanic panic was in the 1980s, I do recommend checking out the documentary Satan Wants You. I reviewed it a few years ago for our Fantasia Fest coverage, and it's currently streaming for free right now on Tubi, and it kind of gives you a little bit more of an understanding just really how big of a deal this thing was, and how much it really gripped our nation. But here in The Dark Side, I feel like they just kind of gloss over that, and that's fine. I get largely this is a character study documentary on Zeph E. Daniel kind of overcoming this period in his life and kind of how this period largely became therapy that inspired Society, and just kind of going off of that. But I feel like I just wanted more depth. Now, this movie is only 75 minutes, and I think that's kind of where the story feels like it restrains itself quite a good bit, because there is a 7-8 minute departure where we also talk about Richard Stanley, who, I don't believe the two have ever worked together, but yet kind of here, and it kind of feeds in a little bit to the narrative of the larger documentary, but for me it felt like a 95% departure from the story that we were trying to engage in. If you've come across our channel anytime over the last couple of years that I've been doing reviews and been doing videos, then you know my number one pet peeve for film is what I would call false endings. Parts in the film's latter half where it feels like this could have been a perfect ending, but the story just kept going. There are 3 or 4 times in this documentary where it feels like the story could have ended there, but it just finds some new way to keep going. And my issue with that is that this movie is less than 80 minutes, and I think this movie should have been restructured in a different fashion to avoid some of those things from happening. I feel like I've been doing a lot of complaining, but I really did like this film. I did really find it fascinating. It was really heartwarming in the end. I do like where this film ends its story and ends its note. It feels very hopeful, especially feeling how bleak parts of this movie can be. And I think it also serves as a reminder that no matter how bleak life gets, that it's always worth the continued impression to just keep fighting and keep standing your ground, because you never know. One day you could be on the complete opposite side and have a redemption story that mirrors Daniel's. And that's saying a lot if you've seen this movie. All right. I am ready to run this one through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give The Darkside of Society a 3 out of 5. I think overall this is a very fascinating film. I think a lot of the troubles deal with some of its depth and how it kind of glosses over things that should have been dug down just a little bit deeper. But also at the same time, I think this movie definitely could have been restructured to have a more even flow throughout the course of its 75-minute runtime. The Darkside of Society is now available on video on demand. I'll provide links in the show notes below to check it out. I think this movie does a great job at encompassing a conversation around mental health. And so with that said, if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues, whether it be depression, anxiety, suicide, self-mutilation, or more, click the links in our show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Once again, The Darkside of Society is now streaming video on demand. Links are in the show notes below, along with our mental health resource library, how to support us on Patreon or Paramount Plus, as well as links to our social media, more movie reviews like this, including our Society retrospective review from earlier in the week, as well as links to our podcast network and that follow button. So until next time, remember to keep it classy and keep it spooky.